Take a good look at this face. To the gate agent at JFK Airport, 19-year-old Marcus looked like a thug, a scammer, someone who didn't belong in the first-class line. Within 20 minutes, Marcus was in handcuffs, humiliated in front of 200 strangers, accused of stealing a boarding pass. The gate agent, a man named Gavin Thorne, thought he was protecting the airline's integrity. He thought he was just doing his job. But Gavin made one fatal, career-ending mistake. He didn't check the last name on the ticket. He didn't know that the boy he was dragging away wasn't a criminal. He was the son of the man who owned the entire airline. And what happened next? Let's just say, karma doesn't just knock. Sometimes it kicks the door down. The air inside Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport was thick with the specific kind of stress that only exists during the holiday rush. It was a cacophony of rolling suitcase wheels, crying infants, and the droning, indistinct voice of the PA system announcing delays. Marcus Sterling moved through the chaos with the practiced ease of someone who had grown up in airports. At 19, he was tall, with a runner's build that was currently hidden beneath an oversized charcoal-grey hoodie and loose sweatpants. He wore a pair of noise-cancelling headphones around his neck, and his eyes were scanning the departure board for Flight 1882 to London Heathrow. To the casual observer, Marcus looked like any other college kid heading out for a gap year or a summer vacation. He was unassuming. He kept his head down. He didn't look like money. But looks, as the saying goes, are often the most dangerous liars in the room. Marcus wasn't just a passenger. He was a Sterling. His father, Preston Sterling, was the CEO of Horizon Air, the very airline Marcus was flying today. Preston had built Horizon from a regional hopper into a transatlantic giant. Marcus had spent his childhood in hangars, watching mechanics strip down engines, and in boardrooms, colouring in the corner while his father negotiated mergers. But today, Marcus wasn't travelling as the Prince of Horizon. He was travelling as Marcus. He had just finished his first year of engineering at MIT and was heading to London for an internship at the Horizon Logistics Hub. His father had offered him the corporate jet, but Marcus had refused. "I want to fly commercial, Dad," Marcus had said over dinner 2 nights ago. "If I'm going to work for the company, I need to know what the customer experience is actually like. Plus, I don't want people at the internship treating me special just because of my last name." Preston had laughed, a deep, booming sound. "You're too humble for your own good, son. All right. But I'm booking you first class. I'm not having my boy cramped in 34B for 7 hours. So, here he was. Marcus approached Gate B22. The board flashed. Horizon Air Flight 882, London, boarding soon. He adjusted his backpack. He was tired. Finals week had been brutal, and he had barely slept in 48 hours. All he wanted was to get into the lay-flat seat, drink a glass of orange juice, and pass out until the wheels touched the tarmac in the UK. He walked toward the boarding lanes. The setup was standard. A wide lane on the left for first class, diamond medallion, and a crowded, snaking cattle chute on the right for economy, general boarding. The economy lane was already packed. Tired families, backpackers, and business travelers were jostling for position, anxious to get overhead bin space. The first-class lane, however, was empty, a pristine strip of blue carpet waiting for the elite. Marcus stepped onto the blue carpet. Behind the podium stood 3 gate agents. 2 were younger women, typing furiously on their computers, looking harried. The third was a man who looked like he had been waiting all day for a fight he could win. His name tag read, Gavin Thorne, Senior Gate Supervisor. Gavin was a man in his late 40s with a haircut that was trying too hard to be military grade and a uniform that was ironed to within an inch of its life. He had the posture of a man who believed the airport was his personal kingdom. He watched the crowd with a sneer, his eyes darting around, looking for rule breakers, bag sizers, and anyone who dared to threaten the order of his gate. As Marcus walked down the first-class lane, Gavin's eyes snapped toward him. He didn't see a weary engineering student. He didn't see a paying customer. He saw a young black man in a hoodie and sweatpants, walking with a confidence that Gavin immediately decided was unearned. Marcus reached the podium and pulled his phone out to scan his digital boarding pass. "Hold it," Gavin barked. The voice wasn't polite. It wasn't the customer service voice trained into employees during orientation. It was sharp, loud, and designed to embarrass. Marcus paused, phone hovering over the scanner. He looked up, pulling his headphones down. "Excuse me?" Gavin stepped around the podium, blocking the scanner with his body. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking Marcus up and down with a look of pure disdain. "Can you read the sign, son?" Gavin asked, tilting his head toward the display that read, "First class only." "Yes," Marcus said calmly. His voice was deep, steady. "I'm in the right place." "I seriously doubt that," Gavin scoffed, loud enough for the people in the front of the economy line to hear. A few heads turned. "This lane is for first class and Diamond Medallion members. Economy boarding doesn't start for another 20 minutes. You need to go to the back of the other line." Marcus sighed internally. He had dealt with this before. Not often, because usually he was with his father. And when you walk next to Preston Sterling, doors open automatically. But when he was alone, yeah, it happened. "I have a first-class ticket," Marcus said, holding up his phone screen. The brightness was up. The QR code was clearly visible, along with the bold letters, Seat 1A. Gavin didn't even look at the screen. He looked at Marcus's hoodie. He looked at the scuffed Nike sneakers. "Look," Gavin said, dropping his voice to a patronizing faux whisper. "I know you kids like to try and sneak on to get good bin space for your TikToks or whatever. But not on my flight. Step aside, or I'll have security escort you out of the terminal." "I'm not sneaking," Marcus said, his patience thinning. "I'm a passenger. Scan the code. If it doesn't work, I'll move." Gavin's face reddened. He hated being challenged, especially by someone he deemed below him. He snatched the phone from Marcus's hand. It was a violation of protocol. You never touch a passenger's personal property. But Gavin was past protocol. He was in ego mode. He looked at the screen. He saw the name Sterling Marcus. He saw first class. For a second, Gavin hesitated, but his bias was a strong filter. Instead of thinking, "Oh, I made a mistake," his brain immediately went to, "This is fake." "Nice Photoshop," Gavin sneered, handing the phone back aggressively. "You think I haven't seen this before? You take a screenshot, edit the text. It's a scam." "It's on the Airline app," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "It's live data. Refresh it." "I'm not playing games with you," Gavin snapped. He turned to the other agents. "Call Port Authority. We have an attempted breach of security and fraudulent documentation." The female agent, a woman named Sarah, looked up, concerned. "Gavin, maybe we should just check the manifest." "Do not tell me how to run my gate, Sarah," Gavin yelled, causing the crowd to go silent. "I have been doing this for 15 years. I know a scammer when I see one. This kid is holding up the boarding process. Call the police. Now!" Marcus stood his ground. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He remembered what his father had told him about leadership and power. True power is staying calm when everyone else is losing their minds. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. A very expensive mistake. Is that a threat? Gavin stepped into Marcus's personal space, his nose inches from Marcus's face. Did you just threaten an airline official? That's a federal offense, kid. The trap was set. Gavin Thorne had just dug his own grave, and he was about to pull Marcus in with him. The atmosphere at Gate B22 shifted from annoyed to hostile in a matter of seconds. Humans are social creatures, and unfortunately, mob mentality is contagious. When a figure of authority, like a uniformed supervisor, acts with absolute certainty, people tend to assume he is right. "Just move, kid," a man from the back of the economy line shouted. "We want to go home." "Stop holding up the flight," another woman yelled. Marcus felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on him. He felt the heat rising in his cheeks, not from shame, but from a burning sense of injustice. He looked at Gavin, who was now smirking, basking in the support of the impatient crowd. "You hear that?" Gavin mocked. "Nobody wants you here. You're disrupting the flight." "I have a ticket," Marcus repeated, pulling his phone back. "If you just type my last name into your computer, you will see—" "I don't need to type anything," Gavin shouted, slamming his hand on the podium. "I am denying you boarding. Section 4, Paragraph C of the Horizon Contract of Carriage. The airline may refuse transport to any passenger whose conduct is disorderly, abusive, or violent. And right now, you are being abusive." "I haven't raised my voice once," Marcus pointed out. "You are refusing to follow crew instructions," Gavin countered. He looked over Marcus's shoulder. 2 uniformed officers from the Port Authority Police Department, PAPD, were jogging down the concourse, their radios clattering. "Finally," Gavin muttered. He straightened his tie and put on his best victim face. The officers, Officer Miller and Officer Kowalski, arrived at the gate. They were breathless and on high alert. Calls about security breaches at airports were taken very seriously. "What's the problem here?" Officer Miller asked, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. He was an older cop, tired, looking forward to retirement. "Officer, thank God," Gavin said, stepping forward. "This individual is attempting to board with a fraudulent ticket. When I caught him, he became belligerent. He threatened me. He's refusing to leave the secure area." Miller looked at Marcus. He saw a kid standing still, hands visible, looking calm but tense. He didn't look like a threat. But Miller knew that gate agents usually didn't call the cops for no reason. "Is this true, son?" Miller asked Marcus. "No, sir," Marcus replied clearly. "I have a valid first-class ticket. This man refused to scan it. He accused me of photoshopping it because of— well, look at me." Marcus gestured to his hoodie. "He's lying," Gavin interjected quickly. "He threatened to make me pay for an expensive mistake. That is a direct threat against airline staff." Officer Kowalski, the younger and more aggressive of the two, stepped in. "All right, let's see some ID and that boarding pass." Marcus unlocked his phone and held it out. Kowalski glanced at it. "Looks like a boarding pass to me," he muttered to Miller. "It's a fake," Gavin insisted. "Look, if you guys aren't going to remove him, I will file a complaint with the Port Authority. I have a plane to load. He is trespassing on private property at this point. I have denied him boarding. He has to leave." Technically, Gavin was right about one thing. Once an airline representative denies boarding, even for a wrong reason, the passenger has to leave the gate area and sort it out at customer service. Staying is considered trespassing. "Sir," Officer Miller said to Marcus, his voice softer. "The airline has the right to refuse service. You need to come with us. We can sort this out at the desk outside the secure zone." "I'm not leaving," Marcus said. He knew that if he left now, the plane would leave without him. And more importantly, Gavin would win. I want you to verify my ticket. Just go to that computer terminal right there." He pointed to Sarah, the female agent, who looked terrified, "and ask her to type in Sterling." "I told you the system is locked for departure," Gavin lied. He moved to block the computer. "Officers, remove him. Now. Or I'm calling your supervisor." Officer Kowalski didn't like being told what to do by a gate agent, but he also didn't want a jurisdictional headache. He reached out and grabbed Marcus's arm. "Let's go, kid. Don't make this hard." "Don't touch me," Marcus said, pulling his arm back. It was a reflex, but it was the wrong move. "Stop resisting," Kowalski shouted. In a blur of motion, Marcus was spun around. His face was pressed against the cold, dry wall of the jet bridge entrance. "Get your hands behind your back." The sound of metal ratchets zipping shut echoed through the quiet gate area. Click, click, click. Marcus Sterling, the son of the CEO, a scholarship engineering student, and a young man who had done absolutely nothing wrong, was now handcuffed. The crowd gasped. The dynamic changed instantly. People pulled out their phones. The live icons on Instagram and TikTok started lighting up. "Whoa, that's excessive," a woman in the front row shouted. "He didn't even do anything." "Record this. Record everything." Gavin Thorne stood back, smoothing his blazer, a smug smile playing on his lips. He looked at the passengers filming. "Folks, this is for your safety. We have zero tolerance for fraud and aggression. Boarding will commence in 5 minutes." Marcus felt the cold steel against his wrists. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but his mind was surprisingly clear. He wasn't scared anymore. He was angry, a cold, calculating anger that he had inherited directly from Preston Sterling. "You are making a massive mistake," Marcus whispered to Officer Miller as they jerked him upright. "Save it for the judge," Kowalski said. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice projecting so the phones could hear him. "Before you drag me away, I have one request. Call the CEO of Horizon Air." Gavin laughed out loud. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Oh, that's rich. You want us to call the CEO? You think the CEO cares about a thug in a hoodie trying to steal a seat?" "I think he cares," Marcus said, locking eyes with Gavin. The intensity in Marcus's eyes actually made Gavin flinch for a microsecond. "Because his name is Preston Sterling, and my name is Marcus Sterling." Gavin froze. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had ever been. Sarah, the female agent, gasped. She quickly typed onto her keyboard, ignoring Gavin's previous order. Her eyes went wide. "Gavin," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Gavin, look at the screen." Gavin turned slowly, his confidence beginning to fracture like a windshield hit by a rock. He looked at the monitor Sarah had turned toward him. "Passenger, Sterling Marcus. Status, confirmed first class. Loyalty. Status, Horizon VIP, board director, family. Special notes, son of CEO Preston Sterling. Do not upgrade. Do not move." Gavin felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him pale and clammy. He looked back at the boy in handcuffs, the boy who looked exactly like the man whose portrait hung in the lobby of the Horizon Air headquarters. Marcus tilted his head, a cold smile touching his lips. "You might want to uncuff me. My dad is going to be landing in his private jet in about 20 minutes, and he usually checks his voicemail." The silence at Gate B-22 was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of Officer Kowalski's radio. Gavin Thorne stared at the computer screen, the glow reflecting in his widening eyes. The words, "Son of CEO Preston Sterling," seemed to burn into his retinas. Gavin swallowed. It was a dry, painful gulp. He turned back to the officers, his voice shaking noticeably. "Officers, I think there has been a misunderstanding." Officer Miller, the older cop, narrowed his eyes. He had been a cop for 30 years. He knew the smell of a back pedal. A misunderstanding? You just told us he was trespassing and threatening you. You signed a verbal complaint. Yes, well, Gavin stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. I might have misread the situation. You can release him. Kowalski reached for his key to unlock the handcuffs. No, Marcus said sharply. Everyone froze. Don't unlock them, Marcus said, his voice echoing off the walls of the terminal. He stood tall, despite his hands being pinned behind his back. He looked directly at Gavin. You wanted me in cuffs, Gavin. You made a scene. You called the police. You humiliated me in front of 200 people. We aren't going to pretend this didn't happen just because you finally decided to read the screen. Kid, come on, Gavin pleaded, his arrogant sneer replaced by a desperate, oily smile. I was just doing my job. Security is tight these days. You can't blame me for being cautious. Let's just get you out of those bracelets and get you on the plane. I'll even upgrade you to, well, you're already first class. I'll get you a drink voucher. A drink voucher? Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think this costs a gin and tonic? You profiled me. You ignored my ticket. You abused your power. I did not profile you, Gavin snapped, his temper flaring again despite the danger. You were dressed inappropriately for the first-class lane. It was a reasonable assumption. And there it is, Marcus said softly. The assumption. At that moment, a phone began to ring. It wasn't Marcus's phone. It was the black landline on the podium desk behind Sarah. Sarah, who was shaking like a leaf, picked it up. Gate B22, Sarah speaking. She listened for a second, and her face went completely white. She held the phone out toward Gavin, her hand trembling so bad the cord shook. Gavin, it's for you. Who is it? Gavin hissed. I'm dealing with a situation. It's Operations Command, Sarah whispered. They say Mr. Sterling is on the line. He's watching the live stream. Gavin felt his knees turn to water. He looked at the crowd. A teenage girl in the front row was holding her phone up, live streaming to TikTok. She waved at Gavin mockingly. Gavin took the phone. Thorne speaking. The voice on the other end didn't belong to an operations manager. It was a deep, baritone rumble that every employee at Horizon Air had heard in town hall meetings and training videos. Mr. Thorne, the voice said. It was Preston Sterling. I am currently in a car on the tarmac, approaching Terminal 4. My security team showed me a video of my son in handcuffs. I want you to tell me exactly why my son is being treated like a criminal. Sir, Mr. Sterling, sir, Gavin stuttered, his voice cracking. He refused to follow instructions. He looked suspicious. Suspicious, Preston repeated. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Is he still in handcuffs? Yes, sir. He refuses to let the officers take them off. Good, Preston said. Leave them on. I want to see them myself. Do not move. Do not let that plane depart. If Flight 882 pushes back 1 inch, you will be facing a lawsuit so large your grandchildren will be paying it off. The line went dead. Gavin slowly hung up the phone. He looked at Officer Miller. We have to wait. The next 10 minutes were agonizing. The passengers were buzzing. The story had already hit Twitter. Horizon Racist was trending. People were refusing to board the economy lane in solidarity. Then, the doors at the far end of the concourse flew open. It wasn't just a man walking in. It was a force of nature. Preston Sterling was 6'4", wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Gavin made in a year. He was flanked by 2 large security guards and a woman in a sharp blazer carrying a tablet, his chief legal officer, Jessica Pearson. Preston didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with a terrifying, predatory calm. The sea of passengers parted for him instantly. He walked straight through the economy lane, stepped over the velvet rope, and onto the blue carpet of the first-class lane. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus. Preston looked at his son. He looked at the metal cuffs digging into Marcus's wrists. He looked at the hoodie, the sneakers, and the tired expression on Marcus's face. Preston's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek twitched. That was the only sign of the volcanic rage boiling beneath the surface. He turned his head slowly to look at the officers. "Unlock him," Preston said. It wasn't a request. Officer Miller fumbled for his keys. "Yes, sir. Mr. Sterling, we were just acting on the information provided by your staff. Unlock him," Preston repeated. Kowalski undid the cuffs. The metal clattered as they fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists, wincing slightly. Preston reached out and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, squeezing gently. "You okay?" Preston asked quietly. "I'm fine, Dad," Marcus said. "Just humiliated." "Not for long," Preston said. He turned to face the podium. Gavin Thorne was standing at attention, sweating profusely, trying to look like a dutiful employee. "Mr. Thorne, I presume?" Preston asked. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Sir, it's an honor to—" Gavin extended a hand. Preston looked at the hand like it was covered in sewage. He didn't take it. He just stared at Gavin until Gavin slowly lowered his hand, his face burning red. "You have created quite a spectacle, Mr. Thorne," Preston said, his voice smooth and deadly. "I have a report here from my team stating that you triggered a security alert, delayed a transatlantic flight, and had a paying first-class passenger arrested. I want to hear your version. Now." Gavin Thorne had survived 15 years in the airline industry by being a bully to passengers and a sycophant to management. He thought he could spin this. He thought if he used enough buzzwords about safety and protocol, the CEO would have to side with him. "Sir," Gavin began, straightening his tie, "with all due respect, the passenger, your son, did not present himself as a first-class customer. He was wearing street clothes, hooded attire. He approached the premium lane. When I asked for verification, he was difficult. He refused to step aside. In the post-9/11 world, we cannot take risks. My instinct told me something was wrong. I was protecting the brand." Preston listened, his face unreadable. "You were protecting the brand?" "Yes, sir. Horizon Air stands for excellence. I couldn't let someone just waltz in." "And did you scan his ticket?" Preston asked. I looked at it," Gavin lied. "It looked fake. Digital forgery is very common these days." "He refused to scan it." The voice came from the crowd. A woman in a business suit stepped forward from the line. She held up her phone. "I recorded the whole thing. Your son offered his phone to be scanned 3 times. This man refused to look at it. He called it a Photoshop before he even touched the device." Gavin glared at the woman. "Mind your business, lady." "This is her business," Preston said sharply. "She is a customer. Unlike you, she pays my salary." Preston turned to his chief legal officer, Jessica. "Jessica, play the footage from the gate security camera. I had security pull it while we were in the car." Jessica tapped her tablet and held it up. On the screen, clear as day, was the overhead footage. It showed Marcus calmly standing there. It showed Gavin snatching the phone, sneering, and pointing his finger in Marcus's face. It showed Gavin physically blocking the scanner. Preston watched it, then looked back at Gavin. "You lied to the police," Preston said. "You filed a false report." I made a judgment call," Gavin cried, his voice rising in panic. I have been the top supervisor at this terminal for 4 years. You can't crucify me for one mistake." "One mistake?" Preston took a step closer. He towered over Gavin. "Mr. Thorne, do you know why I built this airline? Do you know why our logo is a horizon? Because the horizon is supposed to be open to everyone. You looked at my son and you decided he didn't belong. You decided that because of how he dressed, or the color of his skin, he couldn't possibly be sitting in seat 1A. "I am not a racist," Gavin shouted. "I have black friends. You profiled a customer," Preston interrupted, his voice raising to a boom that silenced the entire terminal. "And worse, you let your ego dictate your actions. When you realized you might be wrong, instead of apologizing, you doubled down. You had a young man handcuffed rather than admit you made an error." Preston turned to the 2 police officers. "Officers, did this man tell you my son was violent?" Officer Miller looked at Gavin, then at Preston. He stated the suspect was belligerent and made a direct threat against airline staff. "Marcus," Preston asked, looking at his son, "did you threaten him?" "I told him he was making an expensive mistake," Marcus said calmly. Preston looked back at Gavin. "That wasn't a threat, Mr. Thorne. That was a prophecy." Preston turned to Jessica. "What is the employment status of Mr. Thorne?" Jessica tapped the screen. "He is an at-will employee, currently under a probationary period for 2 previous complaints regarding rudeness to passengers in 2023 and early 2024. Gavin's eyes bulged. "Those were unsubstantiated. Those passengers were entitled." "Mr. Thorne," Preston said, his voice dropping to a quiet, final tone, "you are fired, effective immediately." You can't do that," Gavin sputtered. "I have union rights. I have tenure." "You are fired for cause," Preston continued relentlessly. "Gross misconduct. Filing a false police report on company property, harassment of a customer, and damaging the reputation of Horizon Air." Preston wasn't done. The karma was about to get harder. "Furthermore," Preston said, gesturing to the crowd filming them, "since you are no longer an employee, you are currently standing in a secure zone without a valid boarding pass or identification. Officers?" Preston looked at Officer Miller. Officer Miller understood immediately. He had been annoyed at Gavin since the moment he realized he'd been used as a pawn in Gavin's power trip. A small smile touched the officer's lips. "He's right," Miller said. "Mr. Thorne, hand over your badge." "What?" "No!" Gavin clutched his lanyard. "Hand it over," Miller barked, stepping into his police persona. "You are a civilian now. You have no business in the secure area." Gavin, trembling, unclipped his badge. He handed it to Preston. Preston looked at it for a second, then dropped it into the trash can next to the podium. "And one more thing," Preston added. "Jessica, add Mr. Thorne to the no-fly list for Horizon Air and all our partner alliances. Lifetime ban." "You're banning me?" Gavin shrieked. "I have a flight to Miami next week for my sister's wedding. I have tickets." "Not on my airline, you don't," Preston said coldly. "You can take the bus. Maybe the long ride will give you time to think about how you treat people." "Officers," Preston nodded to the cops. "Please escort this man out of the terminal. He is trespassing." The irony hit the crowd like a physical wave. The exact same thing Gavin had tried to do to Marcus was now happening to him. Officer Kowalski stepped forward, pulling his handcuffs back out. "I don't think cuffs are necessary, do you?" Gavin pleaded, his voice breaking into a sob. "Standard procedure for a trespasser who is resisting," Kowalski said, spinning Gavin around. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs locking around Gavin's wrists was the sweetest sound Marcus had ever heard. The crowd erupted. Applause broke out from the economy line. People cheered. The girl filming on TikTok shouted, "Bye, Karen!" Gavin Thorne, the man who had ruled Gate B22 like a tyrant, was marched down the concourse, head hung low, weeping openly as he was paraded past the hundreds of people he had looked down upon only minutes earlier. Preston watched him go, then turned to the gate agents. Sarah was terrified, clutching the desk. "You," Preston said gently to Sarah. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling," Sarah cried. "I tried to tell him. I swear." "I know," Preston said. "I saw the video. You tried to check the manifest. You did your job. What is your name?" "Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah, you are now the acting supervisor for this gate," Preston said. "Get this flight boarded. Treat everyone with respect." "Can you do that?" "Yes. Yes, sir." "Thank you." Sarah beamed, tears of relief in her eyes. Preston turned to Marcus. He reached out and pulled his son into a hug. It wasn't a CEO hug. It was a dad hug. "I'm sorry, son. I should have listened when you said you wanted to fly private." Marcus hugged him back, then pulled away with a grin. "Nah. If I flew private, I wouldn't have gotten to see justice served. Plus," Marcus looked at the upgraded first-class lane where the flight attendants were waiting with champagne. "I think I'm ready for that juice now." But the story wasn't over yet. The immediate karma had hit. But real life has a way of extending the ripples. The video of Gavin being arrested wasn't just a moment. It was about to become a global phenomenon. And for Marcus, this incident was about to change his life in ways he hadn't expected. By the time Flight 882 landed at London Heathrow 7 hours later, the world had changed. Marcus Sterling turned on his phone as the plane taxied to the gate. It buzzed, and continued to buzz for a solid 3 minutes, a continuous vibration that made his hand go numb. He had thousands of notifications. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, everything was exploding. The video of his arrest, captioned, "CEO's son, wrongfully handcuffed by power-tripping agent," had amassed 45 million views across platforms. The follow-up video, "The Moment He Found Out," showing Gavin Thorne being marched away in the very same handcuffs, had hit 60 million. It was the perfect storm of internet justice. Marcus walked off the plane, not into anonymity, but into a wall of flashing lights. Even inside the jet bridge, airport staff were whispering and pointing. "That's him," a flight attendant whispered. "That's the Sterling kid." Marcus pulled his hoodie up, but it was too late. He wasn't just Marcus, the engineering student, anymore. He was a symbol. Back in New York, the fallout for Gavin Thorne was swift, brutal, and entirely self-inflicted. Gavin sat in his cramped apartment in Queens, the blinds drawn tight. Outside, news vans were parked along the curb. Reporters were knocking on his door every hour. His face was plastered on the front page of the New York Post under the headline, "Gate Crasher, the most hated man in America." He had been fired, banned from flying, humiliated. But Gavin Thorne was not a man capable of self-reflection. In his mind, he wasn't the villain. He was the victim. He was a hard-working American who had been sacrificed by a woke corporation to appease a mob. He sat on his couch, drinking cheap beer, reading the comments on Twitter. Fly High 99. Gavin Thorne represents everything wrong with customer service. Glad he got what he deserved. Justice for Marcus. Imagine profiling the owner's son. Level 1000 stupidity. "They don't know me," Gavin shouted at his laptop screen, spittle flying. "I was doing my job. Protocol. Safety." His phone rang. It was his sister. "Gavin, you can't come to the wedding," she said, her voice tight. "What? Why?" Gavin demanded. "I'll take the bus to Miami. I'll drive." "No, Gavin. You're toxic right now. The groom's family doesn't want the drama. The venue said if you show up, they might cancel the reservation because of the press. Just stay home." She hung up. Gavin stared at the phone. His face turned a deep, bruised purple. The shame was mutating into a cold, hard rage. He wasn't going to let Preston Sterling ruin his life. He wasn't going to let a 19-year-old kid in a hoodie destroy a 15-year career. He opened his laptop and searched. Top defamation lawyers, New York, working on contingency. He found a name, Richard Vane, a lawyer known in the tabloids as the Pitbull, a man who specialized in suing celebrities and corporations, a man who didn't care about the truth, only about the settlement check. 2 days later, a press conference was held on the steps of the New York Supreme Court. Richard Vane, wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, stood next to a somber-looking Gavin Thorne. Gavin was wearing a neck brace, a prop Vane had insisted on. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vane announced to the bank of microphones, "my client, Mr. Gavin Thorne, is a victim of a corporate smear campaign. He was following standard security protocols when he was verbally assaulted by a passenger. When he attempted to enforce the rules, he was intimidated by the CEO of Horizon Air, Preston Sterling, and wrongfully terminated without due process. Furthermore, the emotional distress caused by this public shaming has left Mr. Thorne unable to work, sleep, or eat." The reporters flashed their cameras. "We are filing a lawsuit against Horizon Air, Preston Sterling, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey," Vane boomed. "We are seeking $50 million in damages for wrongful termination, defamation of character, and emotional distress." The crowd murmured. It was audacious. It was insane. In London, Marcus watched the press conference on his iPad in his hotel room. He laughed, but it was a tired laugh. "He's really doing it," Marcus said to his father, who was on FaceTime. "He's actually suing us." On the screen, Preston Sterling didn't look worried. He looked like a lion watching a gazelle limp into its den. "Let him sue," Preston said, his voice calm. "He thinks this is a court of public opinion. He's about to find out that in a real court, you need facts, and we have all the facts." "Do we?" Marcus asked. "He's spinning it pretty well. He's playing the working man versus the billionaire card." "Marcus," Preston said, leaning into the camera, "I didn't get to where I am by losing fights. Enjoy your internship. Leave Mr. Thorne to me. He wants a day in court. I'll give him a day he will never forget." 6 months later. The New York Supreme Court, Civil Division. The courtroom was packed. It was the trial of the year. Thorne vs. Horizon Air, the gatekeeper trial. Gavin Thorne sat at the plaintiff's table, looking much diminished. He had lost weight, his hair was thinning, and he wore a cheap grey suit. He looked sympathetic, exactly as Richard Vane had coached him. At the defense table sat Preston Sterling and his legal team. Preston looked impeccable in navy blue. He didn't look at Gavin. He looked bored. The judge, the Honorable Justice Elena Rodriguez, banged her gavel. "Court is now in session." Richard Vane opened with a blistering attack. He painted Gavin as a hero, a guardian of the skies who was just trying to keep the flight safe. He described Marcus as an entitled, arrogant princeling who refused to show ID and baited Gavin into a reaction. He claimed Preston Sterling used his wealth to crush a simple employee who dared to question his son. Then, Gavin took the stand. He cried. He actually produced tears. "I loved my job," Gavin sobbed into a handkerchief. "I lived for Horizon Air. When that young man approached, he refused to scan his ticket. He called me names. He was aggressive. I felt threatened. And then, to be fired? Publicly mocked? I can't leave my house without people shouting Karen at me. My life is over." The jury looked moved. Vane sat down, looking smug. He thought he had won. Then it was the defense's turn. Horizon Air wasn't represented by just any lawyer. They had brought in Robert Cole. Cole was a legend in corporate litigation. He was known as the Scalpel because he didn't bludgeon witnesses. He dissected them. Cole stood up. He walked slowly toward the witness stand. He didn't have any notes. "Mr. Thorne," Cole began, his voice soft, almost friendly. "You stated that Marcus Sterling was aggressive and refused to scan his ticket. Is that correct?" "Yes," Gavin said, sniffing. "He held it away from me." "And you stated you felt threatened?" "Yes." "He was intimidating." "Intimidating," Cole repeated. "Because of his behavior, or because of his appearance?" "His behavior," Gavin snapped quickly. "I don't see color. I only see passengers." "Interesting," Cole said. He walked back to his table and picked up a remote. "Mr. Thorne, are you aware that the podium at Gate B22, like all Horizon Air podiums, is equipped with a high-fidelity audio recording system for quality assurance? A system that activates the moment a ticket transaction begins?" Gavin's face went pale. Vane, his lawyer, stiffened. They hadn't known about the audio. "Objection!" Vane shouted. "Surprise evidence." "It was submitted in discovery, Your Honor," Cole said smoothly. Mr. Vane would have known that if he had read the file labeled Exhibit C. Judge Rodriguez looked at Vane over her glasses. "Overruled. Play the tape." Cole pressed a button. The courtroom speakers crackled to life. Gavin's voice, clear and loud. "Can you read the sign, son? This lane is for first class. I seriously doubt that." Marcus's voice, calm. "Yes, I'm in the right place." Gavin, "Nice Photoshop. You think I haven't seen this before? You take a screenshot, edit the text. It's a scam." Marcus, "I'm not sneaking. I'm a passenger. Scan the code. If it doesn't work, I'll move." The audio played on. It played the part where Gavin refused to scan the phone. It played the part where Gavin lied to the police, claiming Marcus was belligerent. It played the part where Marcus spoke calmly the entire time, and Gavin sounded increasingly unhinged and aggressive. The jury's sympathy evaporated instantly. They weren't looking at a victim anymore. They were listening to a bully. Cole stopped the tape. The silence in the room was heavy. "Mr. Thorne," Cole said, his voice dropping the friendly act. "In that recording, Marcus Sterling offered to let you scan his ticket 3 times. You refused. Why?" I thought it was fake," Gavin stammered. "You thought," Cole interrupted. "But you didn't check. You decided he was a criminal based on a look. And when the police arrived, you lied to them. You told Officer Miller that Marcus threatened you. We heard the tape." "Where was the threat, Mr. Thorne?" "He said it was an expensive mistake," Gavin yelled. "That sounded like a threat." "It was a warning," Cole corrected. "A warning you ignored." Cole walked closer to the stand. "Let's talk about your history, Mr. Thorne. You claimed you were a guardian of the skies. But isn't it true that in 2022, you were reprimanded for refusing boarding to an elderly Indian woman because you claimed her passport looked funny? That was a misunderstanding. And in 2023, Cole continued, holding up a file, you called security on a father with an autistic child because the child was making weird noises in the first-class line. I was protecting the peace of the other passengers." "No, Mr. Thorne," Cole said, slamming the file onto the railing. "You were protecting your own prejudice. You used your badge as a shield to bully people you didn't like. And on November 24th, you finally bullied the wrong person." Cole turned to the jury. "This lawsuit is a farce. Mr. Thorne wasn't fired because of a conspiracy. He was fired because he is incompetent, discriminatory, and a liar. He is not a victim. He is the architect of his own destruction. Cole sat down. Richard Vane tried to redirect, but it was over. Gavin was sweating so much, his cheap makeup was running down his face. He looked small. He looked defeated. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman stood up. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Rodriguez asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman said. "In the matter of Thorne vs. Horizon Air, we find in favor of the defendant, Horizon Air, on all counts." Gavin put his head in his hands. "However," the foreman continued, "we also find for the defendant on their counterclaim." Gavin's head snapped up. "Counterclaim?" Preston Sterling smiled from the defense table. "We find that the plaintiff, Gavin Thorne, did maliciously defame Horizon Air and breached his fiduciary duty," the foreman read. "We award Horizon Air damages in the amount of—" The courtroom held its breath. $1.5 million. Gavin Thorne gasped. It was a sound like a balloon deflating. He didn't have $1.5 million. He didn't have $1.5 thousand. "Court is adjourned," the judge said, banging the gavel. Gavin sat frozen in his chair. His lawyer, Richard Vane, was already packing up his briefcase, checking his watch. Vane knew he wasn't getting paid. He was already planning how to drop Gavin as a client. Preston Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked over to the plaintiff's table. He didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He leaned down and whispered in Gavin's ear, "The horizon is open to everyone, Mr. Thorne. But you have to be worthy of the view. Good luck with the payment plan." Preston turned and walked out of the courtroom, his legal team flowing behind him like a wake. Gavin was left alone in the empty courtroom, the silence ringing in his ears louder than the applause of the crowd ever had. He had wanted to be famous. He had wanted a payday. Instead, he had secured a lifetime of debt and a legacy as the man who fought the karma, and lost. But for Marcus, the story was ending in a very different place. 1 year had passed since the incident at Gate B22. The world moves fast. The hashtag stopped trending, the memes faded, and the internet found new villains to chase. But for the people involved, the ink didn't just dry and disappear. It stained. Gavin Thorne was now living a life that was a shadow of his former self. The $1.5 million judgment hung over his head like a sword. He had filed for bankruptcy, but the court had ruled that the defamation debt was non-dischargeable because it was caused by willful and malicious injury. He was working night shifts at a warehouse in New Jersey, packing boxes for a shipping company. Every time he saw a plane streak across the night sky, a pang of bitterness hit him in the gut. He was banned from the sky, grounded by his own arrogance. He had lost his career, his reputation, and his dignity. He was a cautionary tale, a story told in break rooms about what happens when you let power go to your head. But across the ocean, in the gleaming glass headquarters of Horizon Air in London, something beautiful had grown out of the ugliness. Marcus Sterling stood on a stage in the main auditorium. He looked different. He was 20 years old now, wearing a sharp suit, but he still wore his favorite sneakers, a subtle reminder of who he was. In the front row sat his father, Preston Sterling, beaming with a pride that had nothing to do with stock prices or market share. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus said into the microphone. His voice was confident, seasoned by the fire he had walked through. Behind him, a large screen displayed a new logo. It was the Horizon Air logo, but with 2 hands clasped together in front of it. 12 months ago, Marcus continued, I was handcuffed for wearing a hoodie. I was judged not by my character, but by a stereotype. It was the worst day of my life. But my father told me something that night. He told me that anger is fuel, but you have to choose what engine you put it in. You can put it in a bomb and destroy things, or you can put it in a rocket and reach new heights. The audience, composed of airline executives, press, and scholarship recipients, listened intently. "I chose the rocket," Marcus said. "Today we are launching the Open Horizon Initiative." He clicked a remote. This program does 3 things. First, it mandates bias training for every single employee at Horizon Air, from the CEO down to the baggage handlers. Real training, not just checking a box. Second, we are eliminating the visual assessment policy that allowed agents to deny boarding based on clothing alone. If you have a ticket, you fly. Period. Applause broke out. And third, Marcus smiled, looking at a group of teenagers sitting in the second row. They were all young, diverse, and looking at Marcus like he was a superhero. "We are launching the Sterling Scholarship for Aviation Engineering. We are fully funding the education of 50 students from underrepresented communities every year. We are giving them wings." The applause turned into a standing ovation. Preston Sterling stood up first, clapping the loudest. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled and champagne flowed, Preston found his son by the window, looking out at the runway where planes were taking off into the sunset. "You did good, kid," Preston said, clinking his glass against Marcus's soda. "Thanks, Dad," Marcus said. "You know, I thought about Gavin today." "Did you?" Preston raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. I used to hate him. I used to want him to suffer." Marcus watched a 747 lift its nose and climb into the clouds. "But now, I almost feel sorry for him. He was so small. He thought his power came from a badge and a podium. He never understood that real power comes from lifting people up, not locking them up." Preston nodded slowly. "That is a lesson some people spend a lifetime trying to learn, and never do. You learned it at 19. "Well," Marcus grinned, adjusting his cuffs. "I had a pretty dramatic teacher." They both laughed. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The world was complicated, often unfair, and full of people like Gavin Thorne. But as long as there were people like Marcus, people willing to turn their pain into progress, the horizon would always be open. The karma had been served, the lesson had been learned, and Marcus Sterling was just getting started. What a journey! Marcus's story reminds us of a terrifying reality. We live in a world where a hoodie can be seen as a threat, and a badge can be used as a weapon. Gavin Thorne thought he was untouchable because of his title, but he forgot that true authority is earned through respect, not fear. He judged a book by its cover and paid the ultimate price, losing his career and his future in the process. But the real victory wasn't the lawsuit. It was how Marcus turned his trauma into a ladder for others to climb. It makes you wonder, how many Gavins have you encountered in your life? Have you ever been judged unfairly, or seen someone abuse their power just because they could? If this story got your blood boiling or your heart racing, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs to see that karma is real and that justice, while sometimes slow, is always watching. And if you want more stories like this, where the underdog wins and the arrogant fall, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.